The snow fell softly on the city streets as evening approached, coating the bus stop bench where 23-year-old Hannah Mitchell sat huddled in her worn beige dress. The lace fabric that had once been elegant now showed signs of too many nights spent outdoors, but Hannah held onto it because it reminded her of better days when she had a home and hope for the future. 3 months ago, Hannah had aged out of the foster care system with nowhere to go and no family to turn to. Despite her college degree in education, finding stable employment and housing had proven impossible without references or a permanent address. Tonight, like so many others, she sat at this bus stop trying to stay warm and figure out where she could safely spend the night. The evening air was growing colder, and Hannah pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. She watched the snowflakes dance under the streetlights, each one unique and beautiful despite the harsh conditions that created them. Sometimes she felt like those snowflakes, delicate and temporary, not sure where she would land or how long she would last. That was when she noticed the little girl. A child who could not have been more than 4 years old was walking purposefully down the sidewalk, wearing a bright red winter coat and a grey knitted hat with a cheerful pom-pom. She carried a small brown paper bag clutched tightly in her mittened hands, and her serious expression suggested she was on an important mission. Hannah looked around for the child's parents but saw only a man in a dark coat standing some distance away, talking on his phone and paying no attention to the little girl. Hannah's protective instincts, honed by years in foster care, immediately went on alert. "Sweetheart," Hannah called gently as the child approached the bus stop, "where is your mommy or daddy?" The little girl stopped and studied Hannah with bright, intelligent eyes. "My daddy is over there talking to work people again," she said, pointing toward the man with the phone. "But I saw you sitting here, and I thought you might be hungry." Without hesitation, the child walked up to Hannah and held out the paper bag. "I saved half of my sandwich from lunch. Daddy says sharing is important, especially when it is cold outside." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes at this unexpected kindness from someone so young. "That is very sweet of you, but I cannot take your food. You need it to grow big and strong." The little girl tilted her head thoughtfully. "What is your name?" "I am Lucy." "I am Hannah," she replied, moved by the child's directness and warmth. Lucy studied Hannah's face with the serious consideration that children sometimes bring to important matters. "Hannah, are you sad because you do not have a house to go to when it snows?" The simple question, asked with such innocent understanding, broke through Hannah's carefully constructed emotional barriers. "Yes, Lucy. I do not have a house right now, but I am working on finding one." Lucy nodded as if this made perfect sense to her. Then she did something that would change both their lives forever. "You need a home," Lucy said matter-of-factly, "and I need a mommy. My mommy went to heaven when I was little, and daddy gets very sad sometimes. Maybe we could help each other." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. This 4-year-old child had just articulated a solution to both their deepest needs with the kind of clarity that only comes from a pure heart. "Lucy, that is the most beautiful idea I have ever heard," Hannah said softly. "But grown-up things are complicated. Your daddy might not want a stranger to be part of your family." Lucy considered this seriously, then brightened. "Daddy says the best people are the ones who are kind when no one is watching. You were sitting here being kind to the snow, talking to it like it was your friend. I think that means you are a good person." At that moment, Lucy's father finished his phone call and realized his daughter was no longer beside him. Hannah could see the panic cross his face as he looked around frantically. "Lucy," he called out, his voice filled with worry. "I am here, Daddy." Lucy responded, waving from beside Hannah. "I made a new friend." The man hurried over, his relief evident as he reached them. Hannah could see he was probably in his early 30s, with kind eyes that showed the strain of single parenthood and the demands of work. "Lucy, you cannot wander away like that," he said gently but firmly. "I was very worried." "I am sorry, Daddy. But look, I found Hannah, and she needs a family, and we need a mommy. It is like a puzzle that fits together perfectly." Hannah quickly stood up, not wanting to cause problems for this father and daughter. "I am so sorry. I tried to make sure she stayed close to you. She was just being kind, offering to share her food." The man looked at Hannah more carefully, taking in her situation with the perceptive eyes of someone who had known his own struggles. Please, do not apologize. Lucy has always had a gift for finding people who need kindness. I am David, by the way. Hannah, she replied, struck by his gentle manner and the way he spoke about his daughter's compassion as if it were a treasured quality rather than a concern. Lucy tugged on her father's coat. Daddy, Hannah is sleeping outside in the snow. That is not safe. Can she come home with us? She could sleep in the guest room, and maybe she could read me stories since you are always too tired after work. David looked at his daughter, then at Hannah, clearly wrestling with the situation. Hannah could see his protective instincts warring with his desire to teach Lucy about helping others. Lucy, sweetheart, it is not that simple, David began carefully. Actually, Hannah interjected, Lucy has a beautiful heart, but she is right that grown-up situations are complicated. I would never want to put either of you in an uncomfortable position. David studied Hannah's face, and she could see him making the same kind of character assessment that had served him well as a single father. Hannah, this might sound unusual, but would you be willing to come get some hot coffee and warm up while we figure out how to help? There is a diner around the corner, and Lucy is right that no one should be sleeping outside in this weather. Over coffee and soup at the nearby diner, Hannah learned that David was a social worker who specialized in helping young adults transitioning out of foster care. He understood exactly the challenges Hannah was facing because he saw them every day in his work. The system fails too many good people, David said as he watched Hannah help Lucy color on her placemat. There are not enough resources, not enough support, and definitely not enough people who understand that a person's circumstances do not define their worth. Hannah found herself opening up about her education degree, her love of working with children, and her dreams of becoming a teacher. David listened with the kind of attention that made her feel heard for the first time in months. You know, David said thoughtfully, our school district is desperately looking for substitute teachers. The pay is not amazing, but it is steady work, and it might be a stepping stone to a permanent position. Lucy looked up from her coloring. And Hannah could live in our guest room until she saves enough money for her own house. Then she could still visit us for dinner and story time. David and Hannah exchanged glances over Lucy's head. The child's simple solution was not actually that simple, but there was something about it that felt right to both adults. Hannah, David said carefully, I know this is unconventional, but Lucy is rarely wrong about people. If you would be interested, we do have a guest room, and I could help you get connected with the school district. No strings attached, just one person helping another until you get back on your feet. 6 months later, Hannah stood in front of her first-grade classroom, preparing for another day of teaching at the elementary school where she had recently been hired as a permanent teacher. The guest room at David and Lucy's house had become home in ways she had never expected. Lucy, now 5 and in kindergarten at the same school, often stopped by Hannah's classroom after school to help clean up and share stories about her day. The relationship between them had grown into something beautiful and natural, a bond built on mutual love and the simple recognition that families are not just created by blood, but by choice and care. David had become not just a friend but a partner in creating the kind of family none of them had been able to imagine alone. Their relationship had developed slowly and naturally, built on shared values and the daily experience of raising Lucy together. One snowy evening, exactly 1 year after they had first met at the bus stop, the three of them sat together in their living room decorating the Christmas tree. Lucy was carefully placing ornaments while Hannah and David wrapped presents. Hannah, Lucy said suddenly, looking up from her work, do you remember when I said you needed a home and I needed a mommy? I remember very clearly, Hannah replied, smiling at the memory of that life-changing conversation. Lucy grinned, her face glowing with satisfaction. I was right, was I not? Sometimes the best families are the ones that find each other when they need each other most. David reached over and took Hannah's hand, both of them marveling at the wisdom of the little girl who had seen what they could not see and had the courage to speak it aloud. Yes, Lucy, Hannah said, looking around at the warm, loving home they had built together. You were absolutely right. Sometimes the most beautiful gifts come disguised as chance meetings on snowy nights. As the snow continued to fall outside their window, Hannah reflected on how far she had traveled from that cold bus stop to this warm living room filled with love and laughter. Lucy had been right about more than just their need for each other. She had understood something profound about how healing happens when we have the courage to reach out to others and the wisdom to recognize that sometimes the most important family members are the ones we choose rather than the ones we are born with. The little girl who had offered half her sandwich to a stranger had given them all something much more valuable than food. She had given them the gift of finding each other and discovering that love multiplies when it is shared freely and fearlessly.